Hello there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, where the saying to be seen is to be understood comes to life. I want to begin by first honouring the traditional custodians of the land we live and work on. I live and work on Gundungurra land, and I acknowledge the traditional landowners of my guests near and far. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and cultures of our First Nations people. The land below my feet is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm no stranger to the profound journey of pain, grief, anger, and heartbreak that often accompanies the loss of church, community, faith, and the unwinding of our core beliefs. In the midst of this, though, I found healing in the stories shared by others who walked a similar path to me. Here, in the warmth of these digital walls, I want you to feel at home. This is a space where your memories and your story is not just acknowledged, but deeply seen and believed. So kick back, relax, and let's embark on a journey where your story is not just heard, but embraced. I want to welcome you to a community where storytelling is a powerful force. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Sam. So thank you for joining me. I know that this is not something that you tend to talk about, so I feel privileged that you are happy to share. So, where does your story start?
Okay. With church
Yeah, just in
or
general, where does your story start?
spirituality? Okay. I was always a spiritual child or person,
Mhm.
and I did not grow up in a Christian family. I didn't go to church, but I did go to a Pentecostal Christian primary school.
Right.
And I was probably one of the only families where we didn't go to church, and most of the other students went to a few of the local mega churches in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And from an early age, I always felt that discrimination from the teachers that my family were the ones that didn't go to church.
Mm.
So I went to this school from kinder until year eight, and then halfway through year eight, my parents wanted to pull me out because I kept getting into trouble. I didn't really fit in. It was a very strict Pentecostal
Mm.
church. I'm sure it's not church, but Pentecostal school, and it was
Yep.
connected to quite a large church at the time.
Right.
This is in the 90s as well. So in school assembly, they were, what was it called again? Slaying of the spirit.
Oh,
In
goodness
so
gracious. I mean, I went to a public school except for I did 3 years at a Catholic primary school, and so
okay.
that would be it's like a total flip.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking in tongues in
Mm,
school chapel, it
because
was
that's not
wild.
inappropriate at all.
No, but I loved it,
Yeah.
and I was very drawn to it, even though my family didn't go to church, and a lot of my friends, obviously, all of my friends went to church. So
Mm,
I would have sleepovers at their house, and if I slept over at their house, I would go to church with them on the Sunday morning. And it was always something that I longed for as a
yeah.
child. And then in year eight, I changed high schools halfway through the year. So I'm sure you can imagine
Yeah, that's tough.
what that is like for a 14-year-old.
Mm,
And for the first year and a half, I struggled to make friends at my new school. I went to a Lutheran school, so very different
yeah.
Christianity beliefs. It was very chilled out at my
Yeah.
new school. Because I struggled to make friends, I found myself really turning towards my old friends, or not my old friends, but my friends from my old school.
Yeah.
And this one particular day, one of my best friends invited me to their youth group camp over Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited because I got to spend the weekend with my friends.
Mm.
It was with the church that was connected to my old school, which at the time in Melbourne in the 90s was one of the largest churches.
Yeah.
And while I was at this youth camp, that's when I gave my heart to God, as you'd call it, the
Salvation
language.
prayer. Yeah.
Yes. And it was all amazing. And I get home and I told my parents, I've become a Christian and I'm quitting swimming because
Why swimming?
so I was a state swimmer
Oh,
and I was training 6 days a week.
oh
And
my
I
goodness.
I was training morning and night and I was quite committed and I loved it. But I really wanted to go to youth group. And so I thought if I want to go to youth group, I'm going to
Oh,
have to quit swimming.
right.
And so I came home all excited, saying, I'm quitting swimming, I'm doing this. I'm a Christian. So my parents were quite worried for me at
Yeah.
that point. And they sent me to the school counselor at my new school, my Lutheran school. It was the Lutheran chaplain who was the school counselor. And he was trying to warn me against churches that spoke in tongues and were
Mhm.
spirit led and full of the Holy Spirit, and how my parents were worried about my sudden change in behavior and my
Mhm.
sudden desire to quit swimming. So, over the next few years, my parents banned me from going to church,
Oh my goodness.
which just made me want Jesus even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would
Don't,
hide
it's
in my
like, don't touch the red button. You want to touch the red button. Yeah.
I would hide in my cupboard and read the Bible. This is as a 15-year-old. I read from Genesis all the way to Revelations on my own, and I felt like I had a pretty strong relationship with God. And to be honest, I had a very rich inner spiritual life,
Mm.
and I would journal every day, and I really felt like I could hear God's voice.
Mm.
And all I wanted to do was go to church because I thought church was just going to be like, I thought everybody at church was going to be so amazing
Mm.
and that I would find my home and that it would be incredible.
Yeah.
Finally, when I was 17, my parents let me go to church,
Okay.
but it was a beautiful church, to be honest, but I took it for granted at the time. And it was
Mm.
a small community church and they were very open and friendly. They loved me for who I was. I was a weirdo and they loved that about me.
Yep.
They were not a strict church. We when I was 18, we would still go to bars and pubs and nightclubs and not necessarily drink, but we loved going to music gigs and had a really awesome fun time. But there was a part of me that longed for the Pentecostal church.
Okay.
And at the time, I went to a couple of years in a row, I went to a massive mega church conference,
Mm-hmm.
a youth conference, and I loved it. I thought these people are just incredible. I want to
Yeah.
be a part of that.
It's the fanfare, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, at 19, this mega church started a church in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like God was saying to go to this church. And regrettably, I ditched all of my friends.
Okay.
I ditched the friends that I made in this community, this small community church, and the pastor of this other church. And he's not a pastor anymore. He's not even a Christian.
Mm.
He had a
Interesting.
complete 180 in beliefs of
Yeah.
the pastor of the small community church. I remember he sat me down and he told me to be careful and
Mm.
that there was always a place for me here and that they loved and accepted me and that I might find in this environment I may not be as loved or as accepted because I was free to be myself and free to be different. And that places like this generally will try and mold you to fit a box.
Yeah.
But at the time, I thought he was pathetic. So,
Oh, I mean, as a young 19-year-old probably would.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought I knew better
Yeah.
than this man. Yeah,
Yeah.
this beautiful man
Mm.
that I still talk to. So I started going to this church, and he was right. I did struggle to fit in at the time, but I kept telling myself, no, God's called me here. And I eventually managed to find my place.
Hmm.
I ended up going there for 5 years, and I was on the leadership team. I was in the intercessory prayer team.
Hmm.
I was always told I had a prophetic and healing gift, and I got really immersed to
Mm.
the point that it became my whole life.
Yeah.
So I was busy Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Wednesday mornings, Friday nights. They had church on Saturdays and two services on Sunday, and I was expected to be at everything.
Oh my goodness. It's all
I would,
consuming, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was studying at uni to become a youth worker, and I felt very judged even for doing that because some people had the opinion of like, why would you need to study to work with teenagers? All you need to do is play basketball with them. But I was
Oh my
learning
goodness.
about child protection and,
Yeah.
all of those issues. And I certainly saw issues within the church on
Mm.
pro child protection issues, which I won't go into here. But yeah, I was very involved. I was so incredibly involved. It was everything. My parents were worried about me as well, but I ignored them, ignored what my family thought. I didn't even realize at the time how much I had alienated myself from all of my friends before this church life, alienated my family, alienated myself. Slowly, I felt like I lost a big core of who I was
Mm.
just so I could fit in with everybody else because there was definitely that church culture with women
Yeah.
on, wearing high heels and dressing up and having this persona, which was not me. Before I went in, I was very much the emo punk girl, bit of a
Oh,
hippie, messy hair, op shop clothes,
yeah, I can't
dog
picture you
collar
in
around my neck,
I
that
can't
type of
picture you in
person.
heels, Sam.
No,
I really can't.
no,
I see like a sort of boho beachy vibe more so, but yeah, not
yeah,
sort of, perfectly trimmed hair and high heels.
yeah. Well, I rebelled against that for a
Yeah.
really long time. It took a while to break me, but I do remember the one day that I actually felt like I wanted to wear heels, and not because someone told me to, but because I wanted to. And
Mm.
I walked into church wearing these heels, and one of the pastors said to me, wow, I can see that God has really been working on you. Like, what a transformation.
All because you wore high heels.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So eventually, after being there for about 5 years, or I would say maybe 4 years in, I was feeling incredibly burnt out
Mm.
with how busy everything was. I went through a breakup. There was a lot happening. There was a big church scandal that happened that was all over the media with one of the pastors, and I was just incredibly burnt out.
Yeah.
And I asked if I could please leave the youth team. And they told me I wasn't allowed to because God was testing me. And so I just remember my soul felt like it was being tortured. And I felt like I lost that pure, beautiful relationship that I had with God
Mm,
when I was in my bedroom at home as a teenager before I got exposed to anything about church, politics,
mm,
or religion. That felt really pure to me. And
yeah.
like I had a true connection. And now suddenly I found myself feeling like I needed to ask for permission to do anything, permission to change jobs. I got my first job out of uni working at a homeless crisis center. And they wanted to promote me and give me a job as a drug and alcohol counselor
Mm,
because this homeless crisis center were connected to a church on a Sunday, which was for homeless people. They told me I could work my own hours. I could work at night time. I could work in the morning. But
gosh,
the
that's
only
like the
time they needed
dream.
me, pardon?
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah. And the only time they required me to actually solidly be there was during their church service because they would often have people ODing
Mm,
or, needing to talk about their addiction. So they just wanted me there on a Sunday morning. And I told my pastors at my other church, and they told me that I can only serve one church
oh my
and
gosh.
basically made me feel terrible that I would even consider not going to the Sunday morning church service, even though I would have been going in the afternoon. And it felt like a huge slap in the face. And I was incredibly confused because I always thought that church was for the poor
Mm,
and for the homeless and for the drug addicted.
yeah.
And they made me feel like I was rejecting God in that moment. And essentially, I ended up leaving that job so that I could continue to give my life away to,
Oh my
to this
goodness.
mega church, which I've always regretted because it was such an incredible job that I was in. It was such a privileged position to be in as well. So after the church scandal and feeling very burnt out, I didn't know what to do and I felt like I lost myself. And I got in my car and I just started driving and I drove 3 hours away to the peninsula this is in Victoria. So I was down in Portsea and by this time it was midnight. And I remember walking on the pier there. It was either Portsea or around there, but I was on some sort of a pier and there was a full moon.
Mm,
And I remember standing and staring at this moon and I was crying. And I said, I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so lost.
yeah.
And I felt that familiar voice or that whisper in my heart saying, everything is going to be okay. You're going to find your way again, but it's going to look incredibly different
Mm,
than what you pictured.
yeah.
Your journey is going to take a different road, but it will all work out in the end. And it wasn't for 10 years that I understood what that actually meant.
Yeah.
So I went home and I thought that meant I would feel excited about being at church again
Mm,
and feel that like same familiar love that I had and excitement for church. But of course, nothing changed. And I became more and more depressed. And then eventually I just had enough. And it was the year 2009. So this is quite a while ago now. I told the youth leader or youth pastor that I didn't want to be part of the youth team anymore. And he was like, okay. And that was it. I was a youth leader for 5 years and there was no thank you. There was nothing. And in the past, when youth leaders had moved on, they would get them up on stage and celebrate them and give them flowers and thank them. But it was just silence.
mm,
And I found myself walking back into church on a Sunday and nobody would talk to me.
mm,
And I just felt incredibly alone. I felt like I had no family. There was thousands of people that went there, but it was the most alone feeling I had ever felt. And I also don't do well in crowds. So I would walk through the foyer and it was just like, oh, so many people. And I'm like, what is this? I get judged for working with homeless people. I
Mm.
used to bring homeless people to a church service and people would like move away from us.
Oh,
I thought that is not God's heart. Who
no.
is this God that they're preaching about? They're doing all these offering talks, but where is that money going? Is that
Mm.
helping these people? I don't think so. And then one day I woke up on a Sunday. It was probably February or March in 2009. And I decided not to go to church that day.
Wow.
And I had the best freaking day.
Oh,
And so for the next year, or well, after that first Sunday of not going, I was like, this is great. Nobody called me, nobody checked in on me. And
oh,
then the next week came, decided not to go. And then the week after that, I decided not to go. And it was amazing. And I felt like my body completely crushed though,
yeah.
because I was so burnt out and I slept for so long. I slept and I slept and I slept. And I found myself suddenly with nobody in my life. I had no community. I had no friends. I had no one calling me. And I would just stay at home lying on the couch. But I think I really needed that as well. And
Yeah.
I felt a real anger towards God. And I remember yelling at him and saying, well, you talk about the lost sheep or the lost coin and how you would go find them. So I'm going to go live my life. And if that's true, you'll find me,
Mm.
but I'm not going to wait around anymore. And I ended up having the best year of my life.
Yeah.
So at the time, I was working for a youth justice centre, which was also very eye-opening of the real issues that young people were facing
Mm.
that the church was so blind to because they aren't wealthy.
Yeah.
And
Well,
my friendship group,
and ignorant, I think. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And my friendship group became my work friends.
Mm.
And then over that year, I was calling up my old friends and apologizing for abandoning them and for disappearing from their life. And I explained to them what happened. And then over the next, well, where are we at now? 2023.
Mm. We
I
are.
would say healing took me 10 years
Yeah.
of relearning who I am, what my core beliefs were,
Mm.
spirituality. I completely ignored my intuition and that, which when I was a child, I called the Holy Spirit, and
Yeah.
I would say intuition now, but I ignored that voice, which was a core part of my life.
Mm.
And I did miss that, but I also felt like I had to go on the other extreme of partying, having fun.
Yeah.
I I was just before I turned 25 when I left, and I felt like I went through a process of grieving, losing my early 20s, which is very much about finding yourself, having fun, not having responsibility. And I really did grieve that, and I still grieve that.
Yeah.
I grieve that girl. But yeah, it took about 10 years to understand what I believe. And my beliefs are so different. I would not call myself a Christian now because I would be told I'm going to hell.
Yeah.
But I am a very spiritual person. I just practice my spirituality in a different way. The mega church would probably call it witchy or heathen, but
Ah, alternative. Let's go with
alternative.
alternative. But yeah, they would not use the word alternative at all.
No, but
Yeah.
it does feel very similar to what I had when I was 14. to 19. I just don't read the Bible now.
Fair. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you know, we use the word church, but the things that you're talking about are, you know, of isolation and conformity and dress standards and having to ask permission and, you know, that's the language of a cult, realistic.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, well, the youth team I was in, even I should say as well that over the years, I've had a lot of people, including leaders and mentors in my life and pastors, call me up to apologize, and we've reconnected
yeah.
and it's all good. And when I say droves of people left that church, I mean it. Most of the leadership team that were there when I was there, they've all left,
Yeah.
and they would all call it a cult now, or maybe not a cult, but because they're still in church as well. But
Yeah.
but they all felt like over the years they had to go through that process of what's it called?
Construction.
Yeah, deconstruction.
Yeah.
And they've done that in their own way through different churches. For me, I just couldn't go back to church. I
Mm.
tried in that first year, but I just couldn't do it. It's
Yeah.
not for me. I have no desire
Yeah.
to go there at all.
And I think a lot of, you know, deconstruction looks really different for everybody. It's, you know, some deconstruct and deconvert, some deconstruct and then reconstruct what their belief systems were. But I think a cult brings a very emotive, strong imagery and language for a lot of people. And so I
Yeah,
think it's hard to refer to places as that. But the
it
reality,
100% was though.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, if
I
we
would.
don't call it a cult, it's cult adjacent, you know, it's
Yeah,
there are cultish behaviors and
yeah.
standards and things that you would expect in the ones that you see
Hmm.
at, you know, midnight on a documentary. You know, they're the
Hmm.
same. It's like the same rules, just it's looks different. It's
Yeah.
packaged differently. Um,
We would get in trouble for talking to the opposite sex after 9 p.m.
oh, yeah.
because that's when the devil was out and that's when temptation was rampant.
Mate, if I had known if that he was only out after 9 p.m., I could have had a whole lot of fun with that. Um, I mean,
We
oh,
we this is quite funny. I'm only going to tell you more of the funny things rather than the
yeah,
scandalous events that made it to the media.
yeah.
But I remember every Sunday we would go back to this youth pastor's house. He was a lot of fun, by the way. I loved him. He was a lot of fun. He was a very charismatic character. And he's done a lot of healing. He was young. He was 26 at the time, which to me felt old when I was then. But looking back, he was young.
Yeah.
And I've heard he's really changed and he's working with homeless people now.
Mm.
And that's his church. And so yeah, I definitely don't want to bag this man. But
Yeah.
at the time, we would go to their house. So there'd be like 50 of us. And in my community church that I had previously gone to, most of my friends were boys.
Yeah.
I was just someone that was naturally more friends with boys, or we were just like more of a mixed group. And I remember walking into the living room, and all of the boys were in there, and all of the girls were in the kitchen.
Oh
And
my,
I walked in and everyone just stared at me. And he said, "What are you doing in here? The girls are meant to be in the other room." And I was so embarrassed.
oh my goodness. I mean, aside from like the deeply um layered toxicity of that, just like calling someone out publicly on anything is embarrassing.
Yeah, I was 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
I
goodness.
felt like I got branded as, I don't know what word I want to use, but I definitely felt different
Mm.
because my family weren't in the church.
It's like the Muggles in Harry Potter.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yes. And there was people who had certain surnames that in the Christian world would be like famous. I want
yeah,
to be around that. And then if you didn't have that surname or you didn't have parents who were leaders in the church or even at church, you were maybe not considered marriage material. So
yeah,
no boy went near me
yeah.
when I was there. Yeah.
No, I get that completely. As you know, I also don't have a religious family, so I get that. Even just on a surface level, there you can feel the difference for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was nothing they said to me.
Yeah.
It was just a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Particularly if the church that you're in has lots of biological family groups. You very
Yes.
I
Who
have
marry each other?
yes, and everybody is related to everybody through some link.
Yeah.
You felt very much on the outer. There was you knew that there was a difference there. And
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing to navigate as a young person amongst everything else that you're sort of
Yeah.
trying to work out.
Yeah. And trying to fit in. You're still at
Yeah.
that age where you just desperately want to fit in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that process of deconstructing like for you?
Huh. Well, I would say that first year I completely ignored everything
Mm,
and I was not spiritual at all. And I just felt like I had to go the other extreme to get away from that,
yeah, the rebellion.
which was very sad for me as well, because I did recognize that my experience at megachurch wasn't necessarily my experience of God,
Yeah.
but I felt like I couldn't compartmentalize that at the time and I just had to get away from it. And it wasn't until 2016 I had my first baby. So the 2016, that's what, like 7 years
Yeah.
after leaving church. I, during that time, had lived in Canada, which was amazing because nobody knew that I was a churchy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Melbourne, everybody I was associated with was associated with the church in some way. So I couldn't go anywhere without bumping into people
Yeah.
who knew me, who either knew me through church or knew me to have been a churchy.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want anything to do with that. So I lived in Canada for almost 2 years
Mm.
and never told anybody about my church experience or church life. And I felt like I could form a new identity or like find myself. I felt like those years was very much about finding myself and who I truly am, what I liked, because I lost every part of my personality.
Yeah.
I was the hyperactive, fun loving,
Mm.
loved hugging people and giving people cuddles before I went to the mega church.
Yeah.
And then I would get in trouble because my boobs were touching people or whatever.
Or it might
And
come off
so,
as come off as flirtatious or
yes, I always got in trouble for being flirty.
mm,
And so, yeah, I firstly, those up until 2016 was very much finding what I liked, all
yeah.
of this outside of spirituality, what I liked, who I was. I met a man, we got married. 2015, I had my first baby, and having her really got me thinking about what I wanted to teach her and what my values were. And I felt like I was really longing and missing that intuitive part of myself,
Mm,
that part that I called the Holy Spirit, which I now call intuition. And I missed that because I had some really incredible, amazing experiences when I listened to my intuition or slash Holy Spirit.
mm.
Again, this is before mega church days. I would go into the city with my friends and we would just allow ourselves to be led. And then we would end up having dinner with a couple of people who were living on the streets or just
Oh,
things like that, like adventures like that. And I missed that part of myself. And then that's essentially how Paper Crane of Hope started, which is now my counselling business, because I really wanted to learn how to tap back into that side of myself again.
yeah.
I won't go into the story of Paper Crane of Hope here unless you wanted me to, but yeah, essentially that's how I started listening to my intuition again, was through these paper cranes that I was leaving. And then just over the years, I found myself journaling again, tapping into that side of myself. I'm into oracle cards. I'm into meditation. I'm into, which to me is like prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just kind of found that, and I feel like I have a relationship with God again,
Mm.
but it's not the God that I pictured
Yeah.
back in the church days.
Mm.
I feel like I have a relationship with Mother Earth and nature and being more connected in that way and learning about the moon
Mm.
and the stars, which I believe God created anyway, right? And that's all interconnected. These days, I might call God the universe,
Yep.
but how can God and the universe not be different? Like to me,
Mm-hmm.
that's the same.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is what I mean. And I felt like I had to keep those beliefs and parts of myself quiet. And I felt guilty about that. But then I've learned, well, that's no one else's business. I'm
Yeah.
allowed to believe what I believe, and I don't have to evangelize about it. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I realized. I always, when I was younger, felt like I always had to evangelize about my faith and lead people to God. And I was known to be a great evangelistic person. I would talk to anybody on the streets about Jesus,
Yeah.
which is very embarrassing. But I believe people's spiritual journey is their own journey. And I would hope that people would respect my own spiritual journey now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that answer your question? Because I forget
Yeah.
what the question was.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
Have you found that there has been respect for that journey?
The people that remain in my life from those church days have been on the same journey. Yeah. Maybe not believe the same things,
Mm.
but yeah, I do feel like the people I surround myself with now respect that part of myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, if you think about, I guess, your time coming out of the church, was there adjustment periods for you in terms of that integration of new spirituality versus old spirituality? I'm thinking like when I first
Yeah.
started using oracle cards, I had to like fight against that inner conflict that was like, but what if I'm bringing evil spirits into my home? Like
Yeah. Okay.
those messages that you would have to sort of keep unlearning,
Yeah.
start integrating into something, I guess, a more authentic or a more preferred spirituality.
Mm. When you first said integration, I thought you were going to say into society. And I almost started laughing because that was 100% my experience.
Okay. Yeah.
When I worked in youth justice, we were a really tight team. You kind of have to be for that environment. And
Mm.
after we would do our 12-hour like block of shifts, we would go to the pub.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my first time going to the pub since I
Wow.
was 18. And I felt so uncomfortable and out of my depth. And I felt like I had to learn how to be
Mm.
a young adult in a pub,
Yeah.
which is funny, right?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of awkward and embarrassing. And I didn't know how to order myself a beer.
Yeah.
Turns out I don't like beer, and
No.
turns out I don't like alcohol. But that year, helped me learn that
Yeah. Yeah.
because we weren't allowed to drink at the church I went to at the time. Don't know what it's like now.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
but
I've
in
always
terms,
found ironic about churches because, like, one of the, like, Jesus turned water into wine.
yeah.
Like, you know,
Well, I do hear they drink now. I do
right.
hear of some mega churches where they're allowed to, but
I
at the
think,
time, this church, I was not allowed to.
yeah, okay. I think in
Yeah,
general, most churches probably do ascribe to that notion, whether they're Pentecostal or
yeah,
not. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's just always been one of those things that I'm like, it's
yeah,
a little bit ironic. Like,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, but I don't drink. I don't like drinking.
yeah.
But in terms of the spiritual integration, I think because I shut myself down for an incredibly long time,
Mm,
I think what, 8 years between that,
yeah.
I didn't feel any guilt or shame turning to these other things because it
Mm,
had been so long since I'd been in church anyway.
yeah.
Yeah. At that point, I'd been out of church longer than I was ever in it.
Mm. That integration into society is so interesting because it's one of those things that I think people don't get it unless they've lived a part of, I guess, a fundamental or a high control religion.
Yeah.
Because even sort of just like, how do I make friends? Like,
Yeah.
how am I
Without talking
supposed to
about
do that?
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what do you talk
Yeah.
about?
Mm.
And so, yeah,
Hmm.
it's
And you don't realize how naive and vulnerable you are until you're not surrounded by church people. And
absolutely.
looking back, I was incredibly vulnerable and naive.
Yeah.
I was almost like a child again. I
Mm,
had a lot of growing up to do.
okay.
Yeah,
I think that vulnerable people are those who find themselves in those situations, though, right? I think if
yeah,
we look at more broadly, I guess, the way that the church uses
yeah,
facets of their services and things like that as tools to target the vulnerable in society.
yeah.
Because, I like what's that? Oh gosh. It's funny when like you used to know Bible verses off by heart, and then like I have a moment where I go, what's that verse again? That one where it's like, come all who are weary and lost, and I will give you
Mm,
rest. And so, I guess vulnerable people sort of land themselves in those places, because
yeah,
you, I know for me, there was a desperation that that would be a safe place to land.
yeah. Same here. Yeah, yeah. I should mention as well, I went through trauma as a child, and I'm now able to see how much the church was able to help me during that time.
Yeah.
It was part of my healing journey
Mm,
from trauma.
yeah.
Definitely not the part that healed me,
Mm,
but I sometimes wonder where could I have ended up if I didn't go to church as
yeah.
a teenager.
Yeah.
And so I am grateful for that.
Mm,
But I was definitely vulnerable
mm,
because I was craving
yeah.
that safety, that love, that connection, that family. I was horribly disappointed when I realized that church people were not who I thought they
No.
were in my head.
Yeah. And I think, all of those things that you sort of mentioned, that safety, that connection, that love, you just want a place to belong, right? It's that
Absolutely.
sense of
Yeah.
belonging, and church for a
Mm,
time, gives that sense of belonging. You feel like
yeah.
you have purpose, and
Mm,
there's a center of gravity about you almost.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I did connect with some older women who I am still so grateful for. And I had coffee with one of them a few months ago. They came up to where I live now and we caught up, and it was amazing. And she was always like a second mum to me and a mentor. And I did feel that sense of belonging and connection with her. And I still feel that.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't all bad. There
Yeah, of
was definitely
course.
some really beautiful moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Now, within your new sense of spirituality, what brings you joy and peace?
I would say I have a mixture of things that I love to do,
Mm,
which I consider it all to be spiritual, to be honest. So there's a part of me that I do Muay Thai boxing,
yes.
and that is very, very adrenaline rush feeling, and I love it, and I love the people that are there. And at the end of every session, we will always do this.
Mm,
And so Muay Thai boxing is connected with obviously Thailand
yeah.
and their spiritual beliefs. I wouldn't say I have their spiritual beliefs, but I love the respect that they have for the boxing ring and that space. And if you ever go to a Thai fight, they have their music and incense and they bow to each other, and it's just really beautiful.
Mm,
And then outside of that, I love to practice mindfulness. I find it very hard to be connected to my body, or I did find it hard to be connected to my body because of past trauma.
yeah.
And I found that mindfulness and that mindfulness practice has helped me to connect to my spirituality and to my body. And I
Mm,
do that in the day to day living.
yeah.
So, for example, when I'm hanging up the washing, I like to really focus on the feeling of the clothes on my fingers,
Mm,
the feeling of my muscles stretching as I hang it on the line, the feeling of the sun on my face, the
mm,
feeling of the grass between my toes, the smells of the fresh washing and the flowers around me. I like to listen to the birds outside, and I use that as a practice to be grounded and centered and present in
mm.
my that current moment. And then
I mean, that's like a
I
movie scene, Sam. Like, you're describing it, and I'm literally picturing it in my head, and I'm going, that's like a movie scene. How can anyone not think that that's spiritual or grounding and, all of those things?
yeah, yeah, because I like to connect with nature and the beauty around me. And I have a beautiful connection with the birds in my backyard. I've got a magpie family. One of them introduced their baby to me. And one time I was sitting outside eating hot chips, and the mama magpie came over and she just stared me, like she sat maybe a meter in front of me and she just stared at me with her eyes, and
Mm,
then made her little magpie voice and was like nudging towards the chips.
mm,
And then I gave her a chip and I watched her fly it up to her nest and give it to her baby, and then she flew back down. I don't know if birds can have chips, but she really wanted it.
yeah.
And then she did the same thing. She nudged for the chip and she like made her little gurgle sound. And I
Yeah.
gave her a chip and she had it in her mouth. And then she made another sound and like pointed to the chip again. And then I gave her two. And then when she was satisfied, she flew off and I watched her give it to some other birds as well that weren't her babies. And it's just
Oh,
moments like that where I didn't get that in the church. And
yeah.
I remember even in the church, I would think, how is this of God on a Sunday,
Mm,
on a beautiful summer's day? I'm walking into this massive auditorium
yeah.
where the lights are off and we have stage lights and smoke and loud music and crowds. How is this worshiping God when we could be outside,
Yeah.
swimming in the ocean, sitting in a park, like looking at the trees? I feel
Mm,
more of a connection in that way now.
yeah. Okay, last question.
Yes.
What are you saying, or what message do you have for somebody who is fresh into this process of deconstruction? They've, just made the decision to leave their
Mm-hmm.
church, or they've been kicked out, or however that's come about, but they are fresh in the hurt and the pain and the grief of it all. What would you say to them?
Can I share a story before
Yeah.
I? and then maybe I'll figure out what I'd say to them
Yeah.
in this moment. Do you remember how I said I was on the couch and I said to God, well, if you said that you would find the lost sheep or the lost coin, and I'm testing you to see if you would do that.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not going to wait and I'm going to live my life. And also the story of months before I left the church, I was on the pier looking at the moon and I felt that voice tell me that everything was going to be okay and my journey was going to look different and my relationship with God was going to look different, but it would be okay. I guess that's what I would say is go on your journey, live your life, talk to the people you need to talk to, get support how you need support, but know it's going to be okay and you will find yourself again and you will find that relationship
Mm.
or connection with spirituality or God or whatever you want to call it, and you'll find it in your own way. And it was only a month ago that I was thinking about that time when I was staring at the moon. I was like, holy shit, that actually happened.
Mm.
And I really did go on a different journey, but I've landed in the same spot. I'm just not some big mega church pastor like I thought I'd be.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I
Yeah,
mean, and I think that, that's beautiful imagery for people to sort of have as well, that sort of just, standing arms out going, let's just live. Let's just live and see what
yeah,
happens. And I love that.
yeah. And I would say as well, when it comes to getting support, because obviously I know we're both counselors and I know you're doing counseling for religious trauma, and I'm certainly open to that as well, even though it's not my main
Yeah.
niche. I do remember at the time I tried to get counseling and I found that the person I saw was a Christian counselor,
Mm.
and I felt like even though they could see that the church I was a part of was a cult, and she said that,
Yeah.
even though she went to like more of a normal community church, but internally I felt like I couldn't truly be myself or share my
Mm.
life because I knew what her beliefs and values would have been.
Yeah.
And so I found that hard to deconstruct in that way.
Mm.
And in the same breath, though, when you talk to a counselor or someone who may never have necessarily been in the church at all, it's also very hard
Yeah.
because they don't get that culture and they
Yeah.
don't get that understanding. And so I've had people tell me about their previous beliefs, and it's been great to be able to say, I've got lived experience, and you can see that relief, like, oh, okay, great. I don't have to explain myself.
Yeah.
And so I would say it's important to find, if you needed counseling, to find a counselor such as yourself, because you have that lived experience,
Yeah.
but you're also not going to have that like inner bias about
Mm.
how someone should live their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think um, when it's something so specific like religious trauma or deconstruction, it's not something that you can just learn in a book or learn from, case studies and things like that, the way that we do
yeah,
with anxiety or depression or anything like that.
yeah,
It is at times, I remember when I was, in therapy for it, it's
yeah,
almost a different language at times.
yeah,
One of the things that I never want my clients to feel like they need to do is educate me. And
exactly.
so when you are with somebody who understands, like you said, the culture and that language around church life, um, there's an ease about that. Uh,
Yeah,
I know
definitely.
when I found when I was on the search for a therapist, I particularly wanted somebody who
Yeah.
knew that life, but was also
Mm,
queer affirming and celebrating.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I
Did
got
you
that.
find that?
Yeah, in an ex-pastor, now counselor,
Ah,
which was great because part of what I needed at the time was I wanted somebody who knew the theology. I wanted to break
yeah.
down that and
Yes.
sort of I needed to find a way that who I was okay.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, an ex-pastor does the trick with that.
Yeah. Amazing.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Finding that right fit, and somebody where you don't have to, explain what certain language or rituals or things like that are,
Yeah.
is an integral part of that healing or that deconstructing. So, yeah,
Yeah.
amazing point. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
How you feeling?
Pretty good. Yeah,
Good.
I haven't really publicly shared
Yeah.
my story before. So yeah, it is something that I've been planning to do for 2024.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
will look forward to hearing more and more as you sort of unravel it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's taken me this many years to get to a place where I could talk about it without anger.
yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think when you talk about it, you want it to be constructive and not just
Yeah.
pouring fuel on a fire, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
That does no good to anybody, so
Yeah,
including you.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Surface. Until next time, take care, stay true to who you are, and remember, your voice and your story matters, always.